So I'm just going to be here. I'm in the greenhouse, obviously, and I want to give you all some updates in terms of some of the work that I'm doing in the garden. That if we were having class today or having our lab today, we'd be doing it in person. But some of these need to get in the ground pretty much immediately. These are the kale and the few different varieties of lettuces that we potted up a couple weeks ago now before spring break. So with the sunny days and the warmer temperatures and things like that, it's really great because you see these kind of major jumps in growth for the plants. But it also means that we have to be really kind of intentional about checking on these plants and watering because on these sunnier days the temperature in the greenhouse could spike up pretty quickly, and if the plants aren't sufficiently watered, they could have the problem of being too hot really quick. And just like in preparation for potting up the lettuces, we have to make sure that they're adequately wet, so we're not breaking that osmotic pressure and not kind of shocking them when we transplant them out into the garden. And so that's kind of the first step, and that's what I'm doing here, is just making sure that these lettuces have a good drink of water before we get ready to transplant them out into the garden. And these are all head lettuces, so they're going to end up having about 10-inch spacing when we go out into our garden bed, and we're going to try to get 3 rows of lettuces into our 30-inch beds. And when we get out there, I'll kind of show you the way that we're going to be able to pack some of them in. But yeah, this is just kind of step one here in the greenhouse in terms of getting some of these plants ready. So I'm out here in the caterpillar tunnel and just looking at some of these beds where the lettuces are going to go. We maybe have about 25 feet where we're going to be planting these lettuces. If we have extra, we'll plant them over in the raised beds back here. It's pretty warm in here today, actually, and so I think we're going to want to water as soon as we can, and we could pop the sides up on this caterpillar tunnel here too. But we came in here a couple of weeks ago, and just in terms of doing this little scan, I could see some thistle that's coming up, some other kind of cold season weeds that are starting to germinate. And so I actually just kind of first step go through with a stirrup hoe again. I'm gonna hand this off to Jen here. And most of us got a chance to use the stirrup hoe when we were working in here a couple of weeks ago. But this should be a really quick job, and I'm just doing that kind of quick shaving of the surface here to disturb any of those little tiny seedlings that we have. So you see growers doing this, they're going to be moving at a pretty quick rate, just disturbing everything up at the surface. When I go through and I plant, I might dig a little bit deeper and get some of the thistle out because that's going to be a bigger issue. Yep. Okay, so I'm just pretty much finished up here. Again, this should be a quick job. If you want to look a little bit closer here, I'm pretty sure that this is a vole hole, and so I might disturb that a little bit up. It might be their nest, or might be one of the little burrows that they set, so I'm kind of doing a little bit of deeper disturbance around there. The voles have done some harm on the spinach in here, and they will eat lettuces, so I'm going to try to kind of get rid of any of those nests as much as possible. So what I'll do next is I have a granular fertilizer here, and I'm probably going to put about a cup for every 5 feet here, and this is a 545 organic fertilizer. I'll show you a picture of what we have there. It's Vita Pro is the name of the product, but I'm just going to be sprinkling that on the surface here. And if you recall, we've also added compost here, so with those things together, we should have adequate fertility for the lettuces to grow. And so I'm just kind of distributing that. I'll go back and rake it in, and we'll basically be ready to plant in here. If you recall, our soil test for some of the plots that we had high phosphorus and potassium. We actually don't have soil tests for the caterpillar tunnel in here, but we haven't had any major additions of compost or other fertility yet. So I'm just working under the assumption that we're still within kind of ranges where we're going to need some additional phosphorus and potassium. If I were doing this in some of the other garden plots, especially the ones that have the elevated phosphorus or it's really the elevated phosphorus, then I would be using a different fertilizer or something that's mostly going to be providing nitrogen. We're also going to be using a fish fertilizer after we transplant the lettuces in here to give it a kind of boost of nitrogen upon transplant.
Yeah.
Alright, so I set up some lines here and a measuring tape, which you were doing this. Sometimes there are different tools that can help you lay out the grid to help with your spacing. We're not necessarily using those. If you had for a home gardener, they wouldn't have tools like that, but you would have something like a string and some stakes. So this is just like a stake with a line that runs down. It'll help us keep our plantings straight. And then a long measuring tape here. And so what I'm looking for within this row, I'm gonna have about 12 inches between each of the plants that we put in. And I'm just loosening up the soil here. I'm not really trying to dig out the soil because remember talking about the weed seed bank and things like that. Down here there are a whole bunch of weed seeds that are just kind of waiting for those ideal conditions to grow out. But I do need to make sure that I have enough space for the lettuce plants to get in. And so within this row, there's about 12 inches between the plants. And then I'm gonna stagger my spacing in the second of what's going to be 3 rows. And I'm gonna plant one about kind of 6 inches offset from that in order to give some additional kind of space for the lettuce plants to be able to grow into. So that's kind of set up there. We have 3 different varieties, and you could be creative in how you lay out the different varieties. It obviously doesn't matter that much in terms of how they're going to grow, but you can make it look pretty if you want. So this is like a red romaine type that I'll start with, and I think maybe I'll do a little bit of a alternating pattern how I'm growing. So if we actually look here, go ahead and zoom in. So I said early on that we wanted to water our plants to make sure that they were thoroughly wet, but I actually see right here that that water didn't soak all the way down into these pots that we transplanted. So I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to go and get the hose connected so that we could water these plants and wait another few minutes before we transplant them in again, just so that we don't give them too big of a shock. Again, I gave these a good soak of water. The water is actually leaking out of it right now, so it's a good sign that everything is fully soaked. If you look at it just really quickly, you can see that it's all fully saturated. Some people will talk about when you're transplanting to like break up the root ball and things like that. In this case, there's no indication that the roots need to be broken up. They're kind of ready to go out into new soil, so I'll just basically leave them, and we're transplanting into these holes. It's actually gonna be easier if I just do this one. And I'm using this line, and I'm being pretty serious about trying to keep the middle of the plant at that line. And I want the surface of the kind of crown of the lettuce to be basically at ground level. There's a leaf down here that I'm gonna go ahead and just pull off. And then I'll just kind of move some of this soil right around it, and that should be good to go. We'll come back later and water them in, and you could do I can do a little bit of adjustment here to really get those lined up. So that's one variety. I'll kind of alternate different varieties here, and I'll show you a photo at the end after we transplanted this whole bed in.